One of the most memorable aspects of H.G. Wells' 1898 alien invasion novel, The War of the Worlds, is the vast three-legged Martian fighting machines towering over Victorian London, wreaking destruction with a heat ray, emitting a deadly black smoke, and plucking hapless earthlings from the ground with metal tentacles to store in baskets and consume later through draining their blood. The image on screen from the website Pinterest shows just a few examples created for media illustrations and book covers in the 121 years since the novel was published. With a new BBC miniseries production of War of the Worlds, though delayed by special effects work apparently likely to screen before the end of 2019, in this video we're going to revisit three of the most iconic interpretations of the Martian fighting machines. It wasn't until 1953 the novel was first brought to the screen by legendary science fiction and fantasy director George Pal, who had released the classic science fiction film When Worlds Collide in the previous year, and would go on to make another H.G. Wells novel, The Time Machine, and fantasy films such as Atlantis: The Lost Continent, The Wonderful World of the Brothers Grimm, and The Seven Faces of Dr. Lao. Pal, seen here in the middle of the photo, originally conceived of a fighting machine design comprised of a dish-shaped object on three stilts, but having decided to set the film in the contemporary United States and Los Angeles rather than Victorian London, Pal decided the machines should move away from a mechanical look towards a more modern electrical design. He settled on a sleek manta ray style craft, with the heat ray weapon mounted on an elongated swan neck rising above the fuselage. The miniatures used were 42 inches across, and Powell explained in a 1953 article in Astounding Fiction magazine, each machine was operated by 15 hair-fine wires connected to a device on an overhead track. By means of these wires, we carried the electrical controls to make the Cobra neck, the scanning eye and other portions operate properly. However, producer Powell, working with special effects editor Gordon Jennings, still tried to incorporate Wells' original tripod concept, experimenting with the effect of the craft supported by three electrical beams of static electricity. The effect was to be produced by a high voltage electrical discharge of over 1 million volts, fed down to models from wires suspended from an overhead rig on the soundstage. While the effect was apparently spectacular in screen tests, it was eventually abandoned due to the risk of the electrical system starting a fire on the soundstage. The Martian heat ray was included in the film, though in a very different form from the box using parabolic mirrors that Wells described in his novel. This was supplemented by green disintegrator blasts emitting from the wingtips of the Manta fuselage, which are described as destroying the bonds holding matter together. And the fighting machines also had an impenetrable force shield, a complete departure from the novel, but an idea that Steven Spielberg would reuse in his 2005 version, probably in homage to the 1953 film. The most iconic vision of the fighting machine to appear for the next half-century was not actually produced for a film, but the album cover of Jeff Wayne's 1978 musical version of War of the Worlds, a double vinyl LP mixing narration by actor Richard Burden and singing from contemporary artists including Phil Lynott, Beth Covington and David Essex. Roger Dean, famous for his 1970s album covers for bands such as Pink Floyd and Yes, working with his brother Martin, was one of the contenders to submit an album cover design for the fighting machine. Roger, who had studied as an industrial designer, was concerned that the tripod, while stable when stationary, becomes unstable as soon as one of the legs moves, and was careful to produce a tripod walker design that was theoretically capable of a stable locomotion. Ultimately, however, Dean's design was considered too modern for the cover. The design used for the album cover of a Martian tripod destroying British naval ironclad torpedo ram Thunderchild was by another British artist, Michael Trim. Trim had previously worked on designing and building vehicles, machines and buildings for Gerry Anderson's science fiction TV series, including Thunderbirds, Captain Scarlet, Joe Nighty and UFO. Trim wanted the design of the fighting machine to reflect the engineering of the Victorian period in which it was set, but also contrast with the design of the Thunderchild ship. He described the leg assemblies as inspired by the beam engines used in Victorian pumping stations and cast iron structures of pillars and columns. The reflective, smooth and rounded body of the fighting machine was to contrast with the dull colour and linear design of the ship. One element of Trim's concept design that didn't make it to the final version was the style of the two menacing green eyes, which Trim had originally wanted to make more detailed and based on the compound eye of a fly. By the time Steven Spielberg came to remake War of the Worlds, released in 2005, he was able to use sophisticated computer-generated effects. The team that designed the fighting machines and the aliens themselves included visual effects artists Dennis Muren and Pablo Hellman of Industrial Light and Magic, and concept designers Ryan Church, also of ILM, and Doug Chang of Iceblink. The effects team included Muren, Hellman and Randy Dutra. The fighting machine design was meant to reflect the organic structure of the aliens, which were conceived as being aquatic in nature, three-legged, and having large heads shaped somewhat like scuttlefish. Spielberg was keen for the fighting machines, which were 140 feet tall in the world of the film, to appear graceful, and considerable work was done by the animation team to make the bulky, heavily armoured heads move fluidly on the sway and curve of the long, flexible legs. The machines had many characteristics of Wells' original conception, including the tripod design, metal tentacles and collection baskets for capturing humans. And although the black smoke of the novel is not used in the film, the fighting machines were armed with ray weapons, in this case twin devices mounted on either side of the machine. They were, however, rather different from the heat ray of the novel. They appeared to desiccate rather than burn human beings, though destroy structures and burn metal, which may have been intended to be some kind of microwave effect. The desiccating effect, which turned human beings to powder but left their clothes intact, did actually cause some confusion among moviegoers and critics. There were two other film versions of War of the Worlds released in 2005, one by B-movie studio The Asylum on the left, included a black six-legged spider-like machine. The other production included a tripod closer in conception to Wells' original. Both films were, however, direct-to-video releases that made little impact on popular consciousness. And finally on to the new BBC production. An image, which you can see here, has been released from the new miniseries. It shows a massive tripod machine with a rather futuristic design towering over an English landscape. We don't know any further details about this version, but while it doesn't appear to have the tentacles or collection basket from the novel, it seems a fairly good bet it will have some variation on the heat ray. I'll certainly take another look at the design in a short follow-up video as more promotional material is released closer to the premiere release date of the TV series. And if you're interested in further details about the design of the three most iconic visions of the War of the Worlds fighting machines, do check out the links to articles and interviews in the description below.